Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. There are no agenda changes, and I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Booker?
Here.
Boomer? Here. Crosby?
Here.
Fellers?
Here.
Padusha?
Here.
Gurl?
Present.
Gorel? Hoffman?
Present.
Jury?
Present.
Kelly?
Here.
McDonald?
Present.
Nicolosi?
Here.
Red? Salgado?
Present.
Schultz?
Here.
Tassoni?
Present.
Webster?
Here.
Westcott?
Present.
Wilson? 18 present, 2 absent.
Okay,
Oh, I'm
thank you.
sorry, Biondo.
Right here.
Biondo is here. With that, I'll ask everyone to stand and turn things over to Mr. Kelly.
Holy Father, Mother God, please bless this assembly and all who serve our community. Watch over all who may serve in harm's way. Open our hearts that we may understand and be mindful of our role in your divine plan. Help us approach each day with gratitude for our many blessings and with positive expectations for our future. For as we believe, so shall we receive. With gratitude and in your holy name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Next item of business, just ahead of public participation, I want to recognize we have one of our aldermen here today and one of our Rock Valley trustees. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. With that, our next item of business, public participation. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers may not address zoning matters which are pending before the ZBA, zoning committee, or the county board. Personnel matters or pending or threatening litigation may not be addressed in open session. An individual may speak a maximum of 3 times per calendar year on the same topic. This prohibition shall include the repetition of the same topic in a statement on what is purported to be a different topic. Personal attacks or inappropriate language of any sort will not be tolerated. With that, I'd like to invite up Linda Zuba. Thank you, Mrs. Zuba, for being here.
Obviously, my speech has been altered greatly. So I'm going to pull out of what I had planned on speaking about because I was asked to by many in the immigrant community. I am a proud resident of Winnebago County, and I'm a proud Latina, born in Colombia, South America. I did not intend to speak just for the Latino community, but for all immigrants, documented and undocumented, that are living in fear right here in Winnebago County. I have been asked by so many individuals in our community for me to share with you how the injustices that are taking place all across the country are greatly impacting our local community. The fear, I can't even describe to you the fear they're experiencing. So many didn't understand that the talk of the detention center had so greatly escalated the fear that these individuals were having. What I had wanted to say is that what Winnebago County needs is not more division. What Winnebago County needs is not more distrust in our local law enforcement, in our community leaders. What Winnebago County does not need is to send a message that they are willing to profit from the human suffering taking place among the immigrant community. And today, the sheriff sent the message that Winnebago County is not willing to profit from the human suffering. And I thank the sheriff for doing that and for standing true to his word, as well as the chairman. They set out some criteria that were not met, and I thank them for that, and I thank them for their word. I had wanted to say that what Winnebago County needed is to listen and to consider things from the point of view of those that are suffering injustice, whether they are Latinos or Black or Asian or Muslim or white in our community, because there are injustices taking place all across the community. And what, fortunately, I have found is in the last few weeks, members of our community have come together to listen, to consider things from the point of view of those that are suffering. What I wanted to say is that what I thought Winnebago County needed is to have the courage to stand up against ICE and to say no to a detention center that symbolizes injustice and human suffering, and today that was done. The people that are cheering outside, that's what it stands for them. A detention center that symbolized human suffering as fear is not going to open in Winnebago County. Today is the beginning of something fresh for us. We're going to continue to build the trust that is much needed in this community. We're going to continue to work with our community leaders side by side to improve our region and transform the region into what we hope it to be. I have to thank the sheriff and the county board chair and state's attorney, Joe Bruscato, and the mayor, and the hundreds of advocates that have come from as far as Chicago to advocate for the immigrant community. The clergy, Transform Rockford. I can't tell you the number of community organizations that have come forward to say they support us and they believe that a detention center should never be opened in Winnebago County. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuba. Our next speaker is Maria Mendia. Is Maria here? No, she's not. Thank you. Our next speaker is Claire McIntyre. Our next speaker after that is here, Mr. John Brantley. Mr. Brantley, welcome back.
I'm also altering my speech after hearing what transpired today, and the Lord working in mysterious ways. I want to start out by saying in Proverbs 17 verses 27, 28 highlights several benefits of keeping quiet. First of all, before I keep quiet, I want to thank Winnebago County Board Chairman and the Winnebago County Board for allowing me to be able to speak and be able to bring you the voice of the people out here in our Rockford community. First, it is the best policy if you have nothing worthwhile to say. Second, it allows you the opportunity to listen and learn. Three, it gives you something in common with those who may be wiser than you. Make sure to pause to think and listen so that when you do speak, you will have something important to say. Appellate court slapped down Donald Trump's travel ban yet again. And yet another setback for Trump administration, a federal appeal court in Richmond, Virginia refused to lift a nationwide injunction that held as a key provision of President Donald Trump revising travel ban on 6 predominantly Muslim nations. I want to also let y'all recognize the fact that Donald Trump, his previous wife and his present wife, both are from Yugoslavia, which is also a country that have a very close relationship with Russia. How can you ban other immigrants when this country was built and found on immigrants? This nation, when you came from back in the 1400s, a lot of them fled Europe to be able to come to a country where they can speak their mind and speak their free will. When I worked the election, during the mayor's election, I had more than 98% of the people knew me, I didn't know them. But a lot of them voices and a lot of the Hispanic community spoke out, and they spoke out of fear of this ISIS, of this immigration. I look at this detention the same way we did when we got Memorial Day coming up, when you hear Tor of when the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor, and after that invasion, every Japanese that lived in the United States was put on a concentration camp. But then later on, after that concentration camp, the United States gave a reprisal. I forgot what year it was, but they gave them some funds for having them in the concentration camp. I look at ISIS as the same way we looked back then at the concentration camp. I also look back at the same way that when our ancestors were slavery, during the slavery days. We had no rights. So I'm glad to hear the fact that the board is not going to decide to vote on that, because for once, back in 2000, when the prison system was overpopulated and the inmates filed a lawsuit, when they filed that lawsuit, they won, and so they filed they came around when they had a 1% sales tax. Their 1% sales tax was for the building of the jail, but also for recidivism.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brantley. We're at our 3 minutes.
We had our 3 minutes.
We're at the 3 minutes. No. You talk fast. Thank you very much, sir. Always good to see you.
All right, okay, but thank you.
And thanks again, Mr. Brantley. Our next speaker is Rudy Valdez. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. Like everyone else, I did alter. I didn't even bring the speech since I didn't need it. The one thing I'm going to say a couple words, but the one thing I did not change is I was going to start off, and I will start off here the same way with these words. I was going to start off downstairs saying that the sheriff's a good man. The sheriff was true to his word. He said he was going to assess the situation. He was going to talk in different forums, different events. He was going to be with smaller groups, and he did that before he made his decision. And that's as far as he got. I'm glad the decision that he made was one that I felt and many felt was the best for our community. We have an excellent relationship with the sheriff. I'm a part of the Coalition of Latino Leaders. We're in 2011. We realized, a lot of the Latino leaders realized that areas, we're fragmented, so we wanted to go ahead and have a stronger voice. And we decided to go ahead and meet amongst ourselves, which we've been meeting the third Monday every month for the past 5.5 years. At the same time, going out and meeting regional leaders. We met with previous chairmen, we met with some county board members, we met with aldermen, with the mayors, with Ina Forsman, with Radek. We met with so many education leaders to build a solid relationship, a positive relationship, because we didn't want to have, when an issue comes up, that it's the first time we're meeting with them, and it's only when it's something bad. It should be at the good times. We should be sharing information and how to make this area, our region, the best it can be. So we've been meeting with, before we had, quite frankly, a problem with the previous sheriff. This sheriff, Sheriff Caruana, is completely different. We've been meeting right from the beginning. He's been meeting with us, along with Chief O'Shea. I'm part of the Public Safety Committee for the Coalition of Latino Leaders. And so we've been meeting periodically, and when events come and things like this, he called us and he says, I want to share some information with you, and we started having dialogue. So aside from the 3, I believe, events that, the YWCA at St. Edwards and at the League of Women Voters, there's been about 7 or 8 other, at least meetings that I'm aware of, that we've been part of. So there was a lot of dialogue and a lot of sharing of information. So we want to continue that, and we will. So with that, I want to thank the chairman, because and many of the county board members, that came in and asked for more information. We provided more information because we want to do what's right for our region. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Our next and final speaker is Reverend Dr. Matthew Johnson. Thank you for being here tonight.
So I do want to say thank you to the chairman, to the sheriff, to Ms. Haymaker, who listened. I do a lot of lobbying with politicians, and some listen and some don't. And I can tell the difference. And in the process, you actually listened to what folks had to say. You wanted to find out more information. And to the sheriff for making this decision today, you put our community as a whole first, and didn't let ICE pull you around. And that makes a big difference. It was a turning point, and now we can say, this is who we are. and that makes a big difference. I made a promise to the sheriff in a meeting with him. I said that if he decided not to recommend this, that I would support whatever efforts it took to raise the money or find the money for the other 25 correction officers you need, and I'll keep that word. And I know there's an audit of the safety tax underway, so I hope that finds some extra money. But I know there are problems that need to be solved. This wasn't the way, and I'm glad you turned away from that. And thank you to all of you on the county board. I know that you got a lot of calls from folks, because I told them to call you. And you answered those calls, and you were unfailingly polite. I did not hear a single complaint from the hundreds of folks I told to call county board members about how responsive people on the board were, that you listened, that you answered questions when you knew the answer, so thank you for doing that, and I hope that continues. Dan, good job. Where do we go from here? What can we do to build a thriving community where immigrants and all people are welcome? What is the county's role in that? There's more work to be done. There are still detentions that happen at the jail. We want to make sure that those detentions, those are ICE holds, those are different things, are really necessary and not unnecessary ones. That's a question. I do a lot of early childhood work, and I work with the health department, the county health department. How can we streamline enrollment and make sure that enrollment in critical programs is open to all people of all languages and places to help kids thrive in our county? How do we raise money for students to go to Rock Valley College? How can we make sure that the services are inclusive? How do we support new businesses and small businesses that are bringing energy to neighborhoods that have been forgotten, that in some cases were created by immigrants a generation or two or three ago? And that's work that we can do together. Turning the page on this opens the page for what is to come. So thanks. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to all of you who listened, to the people who called you. I really appreciate it. And your community appreciates it.
Thank you. That concludes our public participation portion of the meeting tonight. Our next item of business, minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the minutes of April 27th and to lay over the minutes from May 11th, 2017. I have a motion by Mrs. Crosby, a second by Mr. Nicolosi, Mr. Fellers, and Mr. Jury. Any comments, any questions by board members on the minutes that are before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion to pass the minutes passes. Thank you very much. Next item of business, we have board member correspondence. Mr. Nicolosi.
Thank you, Chairman. In light of everything that just happened this afternoon, which is always good to see, I'm curious what the status is with the current IGA with ICE in Winnebago County, which is the one not signed by the county board. I think that was done back in the mid-'80s. I'm wondering if we could take a look at that and see if we can get that kind of in control so that the board's involved with that decision moving forward.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Nicolosi. I've spoken to Mr. Pidlikas and, of course, our state's attorney, Joe Briscato, on this topic. A couple things. Number one, the current program that involves, just so there's no confusion on the board floor, the current program that many of the returning board members are well aware of has been very successful, non-controversial, supported in the community, in the county, and by board members. As a matter of legally dotting I's and crossing T's, and at the advice of the state's attorney, we will be bringing that forward in the near future to dot those I's and cross those T's so that it's officially approved by the county board the way that any agreement between government should be. An example of that would be the juvenile assessment position, where we partnered with the city of Rockford a month ago, and we were merely taking the city's money on a job sharing job, and that had to be officially signed off on the board. A month ago, we brought forward the redevelopment agreement by FedEx. That was something that's been successful, but it is from the past, and we just had the board officially approve that from the past as well. This would be no different, and based on comments I've heard from board members, that would be very supported, that it would come forward and it would receive great support when it does.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mr. Salgado.
Yes, in light of what has happened here, I'd like to make a couple comments. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that came up from downstairs. I actually invited them personally to come up to get involved with and obviously government to see how it's run. I think this was a great opportunity for us to bridge that gap with the community, the Latino community, and get us going in collaboration, more importantly. I think I also want to thank the sheriff. He met with me on a couple occasions with a couple leaders from the community, and it was very good meeting that we had. The dialogue was open. He was open to all our comments, concerns, and obviously we heard from his standpoint of view. So I really want to appreciate the sheriff for taking the time, the openness he had. That I think that serves to everybody the opportunity as a servant here to the Winnebago County to hear the voices of the community and not just go behind back doors and that's it and call it a night. I think that was very crucial from that standpoint, and I really thank the sheriff for doing that. I also want to thank the chairman for actually laying out those 5 criteria that he presented at St. Edward's last Sunday. I think that shows leadership as well, is trying to delegate and show what really needs to happen to move this forward and to not put us kind of in a situation where no one wants to give their opinions left or right. So I really appreciate that. And once again, I just want to thank all those leaders as well as Tom McNamara and Joe Briscato and all the aldermen that supported this, and also my colleagues. Dan Fellers was a big supporter of this and initiated by him, so I want to thank him for that. Lastly, just want to make sure that you guys reach out to the community and bridge that gap. And I know a couple people came from downstairs. I invited them. I hope that we get involved, because more importantly, they open our eyes to see what actually needs to be done, and they do the leg of the work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. I had Mr. Jury, then Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Chairman Haney, and I agree with Mr. Salgado. I agree with the patience and the transparency you had in the sheriff. I don't want to sound redundant, but I've been around here a long time, and this sheriff is an example of transparency. I'm going to make it very clear. Had his criteria met, I think I would have supported him. But it just shows that his commitment to his community and his what he wants to do to correct all the criminal violence we have, that he's very much above board and very transparent. And again, thank you for him for stepping up to the plate and doing what he did. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Mr. Fellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you too for your leadership on this issue. I just have one question going back to Mr. Nicolosi's comment. You mentioned it would be reaffirming the existing IGA in the same way that we did with the FedEx Center and others. Looking at the current IGA, it still authorizes Immigration Customs Enforcement to use our prison. Will the sheriff be renegotiating that contract from the beginning, or will we be simply reaffirming what was signed on 12/15/15?
I don't want to comment on something that I don't exactly have the answer to from the sheriff. If there's anything our esteemed board attorney would like to add, I'll turn to him, but forthcoming. We would have more information forthcoming at this point. I do know it would be coming to the board based on advice of counsel and the sheriff's wishes, and also what I'm hearing from board members, and of course my opinion as well.
If I could, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Based on, I think, what Mr. Nicolosi stated was taking a look at the original contract from 1986, that's where we would look to begin on this. So I don't think we would start with 2015 and work backwards. We'd go the other way, start with 86 and work forwards.
Thank you, Mr. Kurlikas. Does that answer your question?
In the sense that the 86 contract still supersedes the 2015 and not the other way around. Because I would assume that the 2015 contract is what supersedes the 86 one. Because that's the most recent sign, that's the most recent IGA.
We'll need a little time on that, but what I can guarantee is before something comes forward, we're going to be crystal clear on what it is and what it isn't, and it'll be fully vetted out. So stay honest about that, absolutely. Any other board member comments? With that, we'll go to the chairman's report, which I'm sure there will not be groans because this will be a short one. So I'm sure we got a bunch of happy board members. I would just say this, We have not had a detention center, and we will not have a detention center. What we do have is a whole lot of work to do as a community around a lot of tough issues, and we need to stay energized around that, and I think there's a commitment to do that. So thank you, and there's been a lot of comments and conversations with board members. When there's a tough community issue, and there's research going on and vetting by the sheriff, I appreciate your patience and trust that we did that process, because you guys were getting calls, information wasn't to you yet, and I appreciate your patience on that, I really do. With that, our next item of business is the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Mr. Hoffman, a second. Mr. Jury, Mr. Boomer, and Mr. Nicolosi. Any comments on the consent agenda before you? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion to pass the consent agenda passes. Thank you very much. Next item of business, our standing committee reports. First up, our Finance Committee, Mr. Biondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two items tonight. Finance Committee would like to read in the resolution adopting fiscal year 2018 budget policy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then I would also vote, it was 8-0 unanimous approval on the Finance Committee for recommendation, and I would like to move to suspend the rules.
I have a motion to suspend the rules by Mr. Biondo. I get a second by Mr. Hoffman, Boomer, and Mrs. Crosby. This is a motion to suspend the rules. Any questions by board members on a motion to suspend the rules? This would be on item C under Finance Committee.
No, item B. Resolution.
Excuse me, I stand corrected on item B.
Okay, what is it, the ordinance required?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had it backwards. Okay, I move to approve resolution adopting the fiscal year 2018 budget policy.
We have a motion by Mr. Biondo to approve the resolution, item B. I have a second by Mr. Hoffman, Jury, and Mr. Boomer, and Mr. Salgado. The item is before us. Any questions by board members on item B? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Biondo.
Thank you. Then I would like to read in ordinance to amend Chapter 2 of Winnebago County Code of Ordinances to establish a policy for fund balance and reserves to be laid over.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Biondo.
All right, and again, this was an 8-0 ruling. It's to establish a 3-month or 25% of annual expenditures, and would also have an action plan in case we drop below that. And so I would like to suspend the rules on this item.
Got a motion by Mr. Biondo to suspend the rules, a second by Mr. Boomer, Hoffman, and Mr. Gurl. Item to suspend, or motion to suspend is before us. Any questions on the motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to suspend passes. Mr. Biondo.
All right, I'd like to move then to approve ordinance to amend Chapter 2 for the fund balance and reserves.
Motion to approve, item C by Mr. Biondo, a second by Mr. Jury, Boomer, Salgado, and Mr. Gurl. Any questions on item C before us? Seeing none, I'll ask, since this is an ordinance, are there any opposed to the motion before us? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes. Mr. Biondo.
Thank you. That concludes our report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biondo. Next item of business, Zoning Committee, Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Chairman. Zoning Committee has 4 items before us this evening. We have ZO 417, which is a map amendment, and that won unanimous approval from both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Zoning Committee. And second is ZO 917. That is a map amendment, and that also won unanimous approval from both levels. Third is a special use permit, SU 0517, and that likewise won unanimous approval. Now that comes with conditions, special use permit. And lastly, number 4 is V0117, that's a variance, and that also will have conditions attached to that. Reading and then in for first reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Webster? Oh, we have a question, Mr. Kelly.
I'd like to move to suspend the rules on items A and B
We have a motion to suspend the rules.
and C.
We have a motion to suspend the rules on letters A, B, and C by Mr. Kelly. May I have a second? Mr. Booker, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Fellers, and Mr. Boomer. So the motion to suspend A, B, and C is before us. Any questions, comments on the motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to suspend passes. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. I would move to approve then items A, B, and C on your agenda.
Motion to approve A, B, and C by Mr. Webster, a second by Mr. Fellers and Mr. Westcott. Any questions on items A, B, and C before the board? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to approve A, B, and C passes. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. And once again, reminding you, item C had the conditions on there, and those 3 items, all 3 of them are kind of business-related decisions we made once again. And C is for another wedding and reception facility in the county, and now we have several of them for people to choose from, so that's a welcoming thing. And last night at our zoning committee meeting, and this evening, once again, I see that Jason and Molly Brower are there. And I think perhaps they have brought the youngest citizen of Winnebago County to come and see how their county board works. Hold up that little baby. There you go. Congratulations. Thank you. That's all we have.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Next item of business, Economic Development Committee, Mr. Westcott.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no report, but we are going to, you'll see on your desk tonight that you have a whole speed allegation. We have the whole speed packet in front of you, and my committee sat through this last night, a very long meeting, and this is probably one of the best documents I've seen in our hands in a long time. And I want to thank Amanda and Julia for this. You did a really yeoman's job on it. Thank you very much, and please, if you have any questions about it, read it over, look at it. This will be going up for an ordinance fairly soon.
And I believe that, and I'll check here with Amanda, that will be going to operations since it's a board policy discussion. Is that correct?
That's correct. The recommendations that you find within the packet were approved to be sent to the next level up the chain, which would be an ordinance for the operations committee.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Mr. Westcott, anything else?
That'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Next item of business, Operations and Administrative Committee, Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman Haney. Your Operation Administration has 2 items for you this evening, a resolution and an ordinance. The first one I'm going to read in is a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement between the Forest Preserve of Winnebago County and the County for Administrative Services, and I move for its adoption.
I have a motion on item B under operations by Mr. Jury and a second by Mrs. Crosby, Mr. McDonald, and Mrs. Red. Any discussion by board members on item B before you? Mr. Salgado.
Yes, just a quick question. I know it was broken down, but I think $100,000 is the agreement, and I know they talked about accounting. Are we responsible for that audit as well, or is the Forest Preserve their own separate audit that they do?
I'm going to turn to Amanda on that one, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. The Forest Preserve is its own entity responsible for its own audit.
All right, the next we have an ordinance,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Mr. Jury. We have a motion.
We got a vote.
Yep. We do have a motion and a second, so the item B is before us. Any other questions before we vote on this? Yes, sir, Mr. Gurley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has this amount remained the same, or is this an increase or decrease over the previous years?
This is an increase of a significant amount from what it was before, so it was like 58,000, and this is close to 100,000.
Excellent. Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Jury, I want to clarify that. This is after there was an internal audit that came out related to the Forest Preserve by our internal auditor. And then also we had Carla, our CFO, do an analysis of the service in a fee-for-service breakdown, and there came the adjustment. Thank you, Mr. Burrow.
Right, and I do think it's a fair amount for the services provided, so thank you for your question.
We have item B before us. Are there any other questions by board members before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes, Mr. Jury.
Thank you. The next, we have an ordinance adopting a discrimination harassment policy, and this is in for its first reading, and I would move for the suspended rules.
Okay, we have it read in, and we have a motion to suspend by Mr. Jury, and we have a second by Mr. Nicolosi and Mr. Gurl. Any questions on item C before you by board members? Seeing no questions, I will ask, are there any objections to the motion before you by board members? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes. Let me back up. I apologize for the procedural error. Since we have a motion to suspend, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion to suspend passes. Mr. Jury.
Now I move for its adoption.
I have a motion to approve item C by Mr. Jury, second Mr. Nicolosi, Mr. Gurl, Mrs. Red, Mr. Salgado, and Mr. Westcott. Any questions by board members on item C before you? Yes, sir. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Were the details of that provided to us? I just didn't notice that.
Let me ask Amanda if that was sent out in the board packet.
The details of the switch?
Yes, just give a little clarity to item C on why this is coming back, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. Basically what happened is we passed the harassment and discrimination policy as a resolution. We were informed rightly by the state's attorney's office that, or actually by Mrs. Margie's office, Mrs. Mullen's office, that we could not have it go into code if it wasn't in ordinance format. Since that is definitely our objective, we essentially restated the resolution as an ordinance so that it could become part of the code.
Okay, so there were no material changes to the original harassment policy that was changed, we're just making it into an ordinance? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions by board members on item C before you? Any objections to the motion before us? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to cast a yes vote for all members present. Motion passes. Mr. Jury.
Thank you, Chairman. The Operation Committee will be having a meeting tentatively set up right now for June 5th. So mark your calendars, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. Next item of business, Public Works, Mr. Kelly.
We have one resolution, but before we get to that, I have received a call from County Engineer Jill Vanderwerf earlier this week regarding an emergency situation regarding a pavement failure on North Perryville Road. Mr. Vanderwerf, would you care to elaborate what our plans are for dealing with that?
Thank you. We have an issue on Perryville Road. If any of you have been on Perryville Road northbound, just north of Guilford Road, we have some barricades up and we are routing traffic to the inside lane. We found a pavement failure there, and after we looked into it by
both flushing out the debris in the culvert underneath that section of pavement and trying to videotape it. It filled up before we could get the videotaping done. We're afraid we're going to lose the pavement and we'll have to close down Perryville Road, all of which is not a good idea. And so I've gone and taken some steps by calling the appropriate members of the board, as well as informing the chairman's office and our purchasing director, and asking to go forward with an emergency repair, which would mean we're not going to bid this. We're going to go out for quotes, however. They should be into our office next Tuesday, and we hope to start that repair a week from Monday at the latest, and hopefully sooner, and get that road back open to traffic and get the problem taken care of.
Any questions by board members? Mr. Nicolosi.
Thank you, Chairman. This literally is in my backyard. So do we have a timeline that I can let constituents know if they give me a call?
I think it would be a couple, 3 days of work. They pull out the pavement, they take a look at the culvert that's underneath there, and then when we think we have it resolved, we put it all back together again. And there'll be a little bit of time for the pavement to, the repair now will be taken care of, but it takes a day or two, even if we use high rolling strength concrete, to get the concrete set up before we allow people to drive on it.
So around a week time frame?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Nicolosi, and thank you, Mr. Vanderwerth. Mr. Schultz.
Do we have, Joe, do we have any recourse against whoever built that section of the road relative to this failure?
I don't think I'm capable of answering that. That would be something that we could direct the state's attorney's office, but you might be interested in knowing that pavement is 26 years old. So this kind of thing does happen periodically.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Jury.
Thank you. Mr. Vanderwerf, where are the funds coming from to repair this?
We believe we have some monies in our MFT account. I will have to take a closer look at this. This is just something that happened over past several days, but I believe we have the money allocated that we need to, we can get from the MFT fund and put toward this improvement. I don't anticipate at this time any additional cost beyond our budget because of this just changing. And just to let you know, I'm kind of concerned about telling you this, but I think you ought to know so you have some sense of amounts. We think it'll be about $30,000 to $50,000 to take care of this, but we don't know what we're going to see when we open up the pavement, and if we have to go into the inside lane. So we just don't know until we open it up to find out.
Okay, well, thank you, because I'm coming, very concerned when you mentioned, the Winnebago Road, and you said 24 years old. I hope we don't have any problems south of there, because that road must be 30-some years old. The part of Perryville towards Cherry Valley, so we want to keep an eye on that, hopefully that we don't have anything.
That's actually 42 years old.
Excuse me, that's 10 years old. And it scares me that the cost that we may incur, and I hate to tell you this, Chairman, budget-wise, if we ever have to repair that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jury, and thank you, Mr. Vanderwerth. Any other questions? Mr. Kelly?
Yes, the resolution before us this evening is authorizing an agreement with the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency to provide financial assistance through Section 319 of the Federal Clean Water Act for construction of 2 bioretention basins at the intersection of Wellworth Avenue, Wentworth Avenue, and Delmar Street within the Buckbeak Creek watershed. And I move its adoption.
We have a motion by Mr. Kelly, a second by Mr. Gurl, Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Boomer, and Jury. Any questions on the resolution under item B? Yes, Mr. Fellers.
Just a quick question, was this previously authorized or budgeted funds, or is this new spending?
This is grant money from the IEPA coming to us. It represents about half of the total cost of the project. The other half is going to be provided through in-kind services provided mostly by Rockford Township. We may have some involvement providing equipment, maybe a little manpower, but the lion's share of it, half of it's Illinois EPA and most of it will be in kind provided by Rockford Township.
It's a good question, good answer. Thank you very much. Any other questions by board members on item B before you? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
That concludes our report.
Appreciate it. Our last committee report is our Public Safety Committee. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Public Safety Committee will bring forth 3 resolutions and 1 report this evening. The first resolution is resolution authorizing the purchase of an animal transport vehicle. I would also like to speak to this, and I so move.
We have a motion on item A by Mr. Fiducia, second by Mr. Westcott, Booker, McDonald, Fellers, Nicolosi, and Mrs. Red. Any comments by board members? Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out 2 things. This is a long-coming vehicle for animal services. We're going to be getting away from the normal vans that they have had for such a long time, and what they're doing is buying a fiberglass shell and putting it on a 3/4 ton pickup 4-wheel drive. This is something that the animal services people will not have to be sitting with the animals anymore. The animals will be having heating and air conditioning, and there will also be a lift on that vehicle, so that way it should reduce the workman costs, because they won't be lifting these animals into the truck if they're extremely heavy. I think it's good work by the staff out there, and I also want to point out it came in $2,000 under budget.
Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Any questions on the item before us? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next is a resolution awarding bids for vehicle maintenance, and I so move.
Got a motion by Mr. Fiducia. I have a second by Mr. Nicolosi and Mrs. Red. Any questions by board members? Yes, sir. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you know, are all these service providers, are they EVT certified?
That would be emergency vehicle.
Technician,
Yes,
yeah.
they
All 3 of them are certified?
I believe that was one of the qualifications the Sheriff's Department asked for, and if they're not, they will be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Jury.
David, who are these people that are going to be doing this work on the vehicles?
Tri-City Auto at 525 River Park Drive in Loves Park, Anderson Ford at 224 North Alpine, and Bogey's Auto and Truck Center, 118 Ferguson. The reason they had 3, Mr. Jury, is because they wanted, they did it to the relative closeness and for a different type, for different reasons, such as Anderson had some warranty work they could do. Tri-City, I believe, had the amount of technicians they wanted, and I think Bovey's was just because they were so close to the Justice Center.
I might ask Ann if there's anything she wanted to chip in on, or is that covered? Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the item before us? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last resolution is a resolution authorizing the Winnebago County Purchasing Director to terminate the county's contract with the Legacy Inmate Communications for inmate telephone services, and I so move.
I have a motion by Mr. Fiducia, I have a second by Mr. Fellers, Booker, Nicolosi, Webster, and Mrs. Red. Any questions or comments by board members on item D, under public safety? Yes, sir, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can we get some clarification as to why we're canceling this contract?
Fiducia.
I would like to, could I defer that to the Purchasing Director?
Thank you. Yes, we have some concerns with the current provider, and I'm going to refer us over to Lieutenant Huff, who works at the jail. He'll give us some good insight.
We've had over 2,000 repair orders, requests for service.
There you go. Thank you, sir.
We've had over 2,000 requests for repair orders for this company. They're very unreliable service. Our inmate phones go down anywhere from a couple hours to 4.5 days before they're able to fix them. Causes a lot of tension in the jail with the inmates. They want to make contact with their family.
It was, if I could just chime in, thank you, sir, is in the Public Safety Committee meeting, it was clear when they laid out the case that this relationship has been a disaster, I think was the word used in the meeting. Mr. Fiducia, any other comments?
No, I so move that we terminate this contract.
Okay, we have the motion. We do have a motion and a second by Mr. Nicolosi. Webster, but we do have a motion before us, so we're fine there. Any other questions by board members before we vote? I apologize for the mistake. No other questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Mr. Fiducia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now the moment I know you've all been waiting for. Animal Services has 1,087 calls for services this month. We have 160 dogs, 150 cats, 3 guinea pigs, 4 ferrets, 1 domestic rabbit, 1 hedgehog, 3 chickens, and we have numerous amount of wildlife. Just so you know, we've rescued 15 dogs and 14 cats, and we've adopted out 59 dogs, 24 cats, 1 guinea pig, 3 ferrets, 3 chickens, and a pot-bellied pig. What I'm planning on doing also is I'm going to be submitting the first name of all board members to Animal Services, so that way we can start naming the guinea pigs, ferrets, and domestic rabbits, so I have something personal to bring to the board, like Frank the ferret, Gary the guinea pig. All these things would be good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You worked on that all day, didn't you?
Just came to me now.
Yeah, I can tell. Thank you, Mr. Fiducia. Next item of business, unfinished business. We have a number of board appointments that laid over from our last meeting, and I would, I believe, put those up for adoption. I have a motion by Mr. Jury. I have a second by Mr. Nicolosi, Mr. Westcott. We have our items before us on the board appointments. Any questions by board members? Mr. Salgado.
Yes, I just want to point out that thank you for putting those resumes on there and the description basically for the reappointments. For that, I really appreciate that, and I think that shows a little bit more clarity.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on the appointments before us? That, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Any new business by board members? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. We have a motion by Mr. Feller, second by Boomer, Nicolosi, and Girl. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Have a good night. Thank you very much.